this is where we rely on the wisdom and experience of Robert Craddock. Hello to you, Crash.
G'day, Gerard. Yeah, I'd fancy your remote flying across the room as well over Travis's dismissal. But he was the sneaky form slump of the season, wasn't he, Travis?
Was.
We never spotlighted him at all, but I think he had one score above 40 for the season, and that was the century, of course, in Adelaide. But, yeah, he was part of the problem. He didn't have a great year, so he'll be looking for a lot better series against India next season. But your description of it was very good, Gerard, because it was a subtle appraisal of all these get-out-of-jail acts. Because here's a stat for you. You're quite right. They've won 6 out of 7 tests this season. It's a good stat. Had they lost yesterday, which looked likely, they would have won 9 out of their last 18 tests. Just 50% of 18 tests. I mean, that's a fair body of evidence. So that's why yesterday was the biggest day of the summer. It defined their summer.
279 is always a hard chase, and it did go through those phases. So commendation to start with. It's a good win.
Oh, great win. And what I like about it is Alex Carey can sleep soundly for the next 8 months, knowing that he's right for the whole Indian series. Had he got a duck yesterday, there would have been speculation all the way about Josh Inglis replacing him. And, you know, he's done a solid job, Alex. He really has. He put away the Flash Harry shots yesterday, and I thought it was and he even admitted that after stumps. And I liked that part. He was hard-nosed. He wanted it bad, and he got it. It was a beautiful innings, and so he's fine. Then, of course, Pat Cummins, his late fight that he's showing in pressurised situations, it's happening too regularly now, Gerard, for us to call it a coincidence. It's 3 or 4 times he's done this. And his average in the 4th innings of tests, incredibly, is higher than Marnus Labuschagne and Steve Smith. That is incredible. Yep. You just stop and think about that for a minute. Cummins' average in the 4th innings of test is higher than the 2 anchormen of this team. So, yeah, those years where he was out with a bad back, he played first and second grade cricket at Penrith and, you know, as a batsman. And, you know, that really helped him. And so he shouldn't – but he almost needs a crisis to bring out the best of him.
It's the personification of his leadership, I think, the responsibility that he feels. So Swamp put it out there yesterday. Innings 1 average 12, innings 2 average 19.8, innings 3 average 13.8, innings 4 average 33.57. You can't argue with that number.
Yeah, and almost everyone goes the other direction. Steve Smith, and I haven't got it in front of me now, but he used to have this incredible fall-off from first, second, third to 4th innings, you know, because the game gets harder, the pressure rises. You know, you often have sleepless nights throughout the test, which grinds you down, as Smith often had. So, this victory should not be underestimated. I mean, New Zealand were unbeaten in home series for 7 years and 13 series. And those series including wins over England and India. They are very, very tough to beat at home. But what is it, Gerard? We talk about it all the time, but it is the truth. It's big brother in the backyard saying to little brother, hey, try all your fancy tricks, champ, but you're not beating me, and you know you can't beat me. I shouldn't laugh, but the poor old Kiwis, they just can't beat Australia. Fancy having a 30-year gap between not winning series against Australia at home, but a solitary test against Australia at home. It's a buttock-clenchingly stunning statistic, Gerard. That's all I'll say.
Yes, it is. And it grows and grows on them, doesn't it? When they have their moments where they have Australia on the ropes, they aren't able to inflict the damage that they might. So they should have, I will give credit to Cummins on this front as well. The only reason the target was chaseable was because of Cummins, but New Zealand didn't get the 3rd innings runs that they should have got from the position that they built. And then Ravindra dropped Marsh at the start of the day yesterday, which was such a big moment. And their fielding is a little bit suspect. That was sort of the sleeper throughout the T20 series and the tests. Is they're a poor fielding side, separate to Phillips, who's maybe the best fielder in the world. And it came back to haunt them.
Yeah, it did. And look, I heard a couple of the boys on the SEN commentary yesterday, and one of my little net watcher friends was really surprised their slips cordon before a gloomy start to the day yesterday didn't practice in their relative position somewhere near the wicket. They didn't have just to get used to where the ball's coming out of the gloom. And Ravindra, it was a horrible miss, and that will haunt him. Sometimes a drop catch can haunt a player for his whole career. And he was on top of the world after a really good 82. He's a terrific player, isn't he? And I just thought it was significant that Nathan Lyon said he's a future superstar of the game. And Lyon chooses his words very carefully when he's rating opposition players. But he knows all the triggers. And the great cricket writer Ray Robinson always said that batsmen are good judges of other batsmen, but bowlers are better because they have to pick them apart. They watch them closely and they've got so much to lose. And I always listen very closely to Lyon's remarks about other players and when he gives them praise like that, but it was a horrible misfire, Ravindra, you're quite right.
There is a source of lament that Carey wasn't able to get his 100 with the winning runs, which would have been the perfect ending. You have to take what's on offer when the result is on the line. And Cummins, with that reflection in the aftermath, he didn't realise Carey was on 98.
Hey, Gerard, isn't it funny? Some guys are chronic scoreboard watchers,
yes,
and others just switch off and just bat. And I just think that said a lot about the zone that Pat Cummins was in, as in, I'm just not looking up, I'm just playing what's in front of me. And he did, and he was, there was a moment on the footage where he looks up and realises, oh my gosh, he was 98. So it's sort of, it was a confusing moment, but your other point is correct. You just have to take the runs. Imagine if you didn't take the runs and you lost 3 for none, that officially, then you've ruined your entire summer.
Yes.
You have. So that was at stake. And it deserved a century. It was the innings of his life, really, Alex Carey. And, I remember it's times like that you look back right at the start. And when he switched over from the GWS Giants, he went and played for South Australia. And do you know who was the first voice to say this guy will play for Australia? Jason Gillespie. He threw his name up right out of the blue, way ahead of anyone else, and said, there's something about Carey that makes me think he's going to play Test cricket. And I remember thinking, geez, Diz, that's a big statement. But he was right.
It was a win for the good guys for Alex Carey, that's for sure. So the kudos and the plaudits are handed out there. And then the hard-headed rationalism. So my snap judgments crash as we start the working week, whether it's a Monday or a Tuesday, with the stuff that you feel passionately, and it might recede over time. But what I feel passionately is that top 6 in that order is not my batting lineup for the first test against India. It's no longer a small sample size. There's enough to judge. In that configuration, it lacks chemistry and it lacks runs. And I don't think Australia would get away with it against India. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm worried about it. And look, I have to put my hand up here, Gerard. I was a big supporter of Smith having a crack at opener. Because I just felt it was just the last challenge he needed in his career. But it's taken one issue out of play, one that he wanted to avoid, and that's the short pitch bowling. Yep, that's gone, because with the new ball they pitch it up. But it's brought into play this other element of just pinpoint seam on off stump. And he's momentarily lost his radar of where his off stump is because he's shuffling across the crease. Now, in the first innings, when he shouldered arms and was LBW, there's no way 2 or 3 years ago Steve Smith would have got out like that. That ball probably actually would have been played through mid-wicket across his pads. So, and I sense the harder he tries, because he's thinking, right, I'm an opening batsman. I've got to know where my off stump is. I've got to let the ball go and all this. And I think the harder he's getting into that mentality, the more it's sort of freezing him up. So he is one of the game's great problem solvers. There is that. And he's got about 8 months to stew in it, which I don't think necessarily is a good thing, because he's not on the IPL circuit, so he'll go home and he'll play golf, which is his new passion. But, yeah, I don't like it. But I ask you this, Gerard. If not opener for Steve Smith, then where? Because I can't have him back at number 4 because, sorry, Green's the only guy under 30, or he will be next summer. And he's blossoming at 4. I cannot move Cam Green at 4. So, where I cannot drop Steve Smith from the team either. because he's Steve Smith. And you want to be absolutely categorically certain that we know he's fading, but he still averaged 40 last year in tests. He's averaging 30 this year in tests. That's not good, but he's still Steve Smith. So where do you put him, Gerard?
So I would undo everything that they've done. This was never the selectors' idea. It was never their way that they were putting Smith up. This was Smith volunteering. He didn't think Green should be opening, so he was prepared to do it. He wanted to take on the challenge. So I'm the selectors going, that was never our idea. We've seen it. It doesn't work. And the risk is that would hasten the end for Smith. I would go back to the original concept is we need the Dave Warner replacement at the top of the order for the chemistry, for the dynamic. And that player is in the top 6. It's Travis Head, who's now totally out of form at 5. I would revert to probably what looked the most sensible, but they didn't want to do it. And if you want to hold to your top 6 of the best 6 batters in the country, and they are resolute on that front, I would have Head open with Khawaja, Labuschagne at 3, Smith at 4, Green at 5, and Marsh at 6. I think the chemistry of that makes much more sense than what they're doing at the moment.
Well, the argument for that is that, and this will sound perverse logic, but Head's actually out of form at 5. So it's not as if you say, oh, don't tamper with that. He averaged 70 at number 5 this season. He's been plotting. The argument against it is he doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to open. I'm not overly convinced by that argument, actually, because if you're in a football team, Gerard, if I'm in a rugby league state of origin team and the coach said to me, would like you to play centre, I have absolutely no right to say, oh, no, I'd prefer wing, thanks. So you do. Mark Taylor made this point, and it's a very, very good point, that players have got to defer to team interest first. And he's a good team man, Travis, too. He really is. They all like him. He wants what the team is. But when quizzed, he said he wasn't particularly keen on opening. One point I do agree with you. Since David Warner left the team, Khawaja has been a slightly lesser player. The strike hasn't been rotated as much. The field's sort of come in around him. He's become more stagnant. He hasn't been terrible by any means. He's been getting these little innings of 38, batting for most of the first session and all that. That's what an opener do. That's a pass mark. But it's just that he loved Warner and he loved Warner's vitality. And it's such a good point you make, Gerard. And this is why I'm not pushing for Renshaw, Bancroft or Harris. Harris is probably more up-tempo than the others. But you can't put another quiet opener in with Khawaja. It just can't happen. Your Head plan is definitely worthy of consideration, and I think they will consider it. But it's all to do with Travis's mindset, I reckon.
Yeah, and this is where the lead time to November, I think, plays for everybody. So the risk for me is that you accidentally hasten the end for both Khawaja and Smith with this setup in the first 2 tests of a summer against India, where their quicks have been rampant all around the world. And Head's form slump, he will come out of that. And hopefully he comes out of it during his white ball winter, which will include a World Cup where he'll be a pivotal figure. I would just use this time well instead of crossing my fingers and hoping that something that isn't working will work when we get to the home summer. And the total get out is it was never their idea. This was never the selectors' plan to do this. So it's easily undone. I think it's much easier to undo than it is to stubbornly stick with. And something that's not working, cross your fingers and hope it will against the might of India.
Yeah, and one thing you said there that's very interesting about this was never the selectors' idea. To this point, the selectors have deferred to the wishes of players in the team. But I'm here to tell you, Gerard, I've got a bit of news for you, that from here on in, everything gets a bit harder. And over the next 2 years, they will have to tap players and then their careers. It's coming, that moment. And it's tough moments. I remember when Trevor Holmes sat down with Ian Healy and said, Ian, I know you want to play a final test at the Gabba. No, it's time for Adam Gilchrist. He called Mark Taylor in once and said, Mark, you're finished as a one-day cricketer. He called Stephen Waugh in and said, Steve, this has got to be your last season. So these are tough conversations. And George Bailey, to this point, hasn't really had to do it. He's very close to the team. It's worked well. He trains with them. He puts the tracksuit on, and that's all good. But, Gerard, these moments are coming. These really tough end-of-career moments are coming over the next couple of years. And I'm not saying it's Steve Smith specifically, although he's close to the end, but you're talking great players of a very solid era. So they'll know they're alive the next couple of years, the selectors. Don't worry about that.
Crash, you forecast a little while ago as these 5 test series in India will progressively wear down the tourists, and once the trophy was lost, they got walloped in that 5th test. Just a closing word on what transpired there?
Yeah, just a test too long. They weren't bad at all, England. They gave a lot of cheek. It should have been closer than the scoreline looks like. There's been 4-1 victories Australia's had over England when we have categorically pulped them. That was not the case in this series. Sure, a couple of tests were lopsided. I just think that the next Ashes series in Australia, not this season, the season after, will be fascinating, because you think of the age of all the Australian players now, pretty soon it'll just be Cameron Green, the only one under 30. So there's massive changes ahead, and it all could happen in that season. If I was England, I'd be thinking, let's hope almost that these players hang on till then, and then let's try and hit them with a massive assault. Like it could be a really close Ashes series, that one, deceptively close.